Hello, welcome to our latest SecurityBridge webinar. We want to talk with you about our latest acquisition, the TrustBroker product, and how you can secure your SAP access with this new solution. My name is Holger Hügel. I'm heading the product management at SecurityBridge, and I'm today with Tim Alsop. Welcome, Tim.
Hello and welcome everybody. I look forward to presenting to you today.
So, what have we prepared today for you? We'd like to give you first an overview on all the SecurityBridge solutions that we have now and how they respond to the various attack vectors that we see out there. And then we also want to explain you our ideas and the business case behind that latest acquisition of CyberSafe, the company who had the TrustBroker product. And then Tim will walk us through all those use cases that TrustBroker is covering and give us multiple demos, as well as we will look then how the two products, TrustBroker and SecurityBridge, integrate with each other, actually bidirectional. We will see use cases where TrustBroker uses SecurityBridge MFA policies to do smart things. And then we will also look at the SecurityBridge platform leveraging TrustBroker for step-out authentication use cases. At the end, we will have a Q&A session for sure. And for that, you have in the webinar tool a Q&A tab. Please use that to type in your questions. We will have a look at that. And at the end, we try to answer as many as possible. Just in case we are not able to look at all, we will follow up and provide answers later as well. So let's start and have a look at the various attack vectors that we see in the market and which SecurityBridge modules and solutions are responding to those. You are probably familiar as a SecurityBridge customer, you are familiar with vulnerability management, also known as security and compliance module, where we want to make sure that all configuration vulnerabilities are covered and you have the proper baseline to be compliant with your SAP system as well. We have patch management to help you with an efficient patching actually every month, right? This week we also saw again a Patch Tuesday, and with a lot of critical and very critical patches. We want to make sure that you are very efficient in responding to those known product errors. And for that, we have tons of automations there. You also typically need to take care about vulnerabilities in your own code, in the custom code. And for that, we have the code scanner or the code vulnerability analyzer to help you finding those vulnerabilities and mitigating them accordingly. This is the third module here. And you might also use threat detection to monitor your entire SAP environment, to capture all the security logs that are there, and to be prepared for 0 days situations. There, we recently also announced a strategic collaboration with Microsoft. So you can expect there a more detailed and a more stronger integration into Microsoft Sentinel. But for quite a long time, we were looking at another attack vector that was not covered as part of the SecurityBridge platform, which is which are the passwords actually. and in general identities that typically are protected with passwords. We are now today with TrustBroker looking at additional solutions that help you to secure access and authentication to your SAP environment in a way that helps you being effective in protecting that environment, but also providing a good user experience. And Tim will tell us later more about this. Now, I'd like to hand over to Tim because he has a lot of insight how this all happened. And you see already here the picture of Tim with our two founders.
Yes, thank you, Holger. So as Holger has mentioned, this is a picture that was taken when CyberSafe was acquired. CyberSafe, as Holger has mentioned, was chosen because of our market-leading authentication product called TrustBroker. And I think it's just worth just capturing in one sentence why that happened. And it's really about the potential that's delivered through the integration of both products. By integrating TrustBroker with the SecurityBridge platform, not only can we prevent and detect cyber attacks or threats, we can also block them. And that's because TrustBroker is handling the authentication of users across your entire landscape. You're typically running SecurityBridge platform to monitor and detect what's happening and look at user behavior, but the TrustBroker product is actually handling real-time user logins to the system, logins to SAP systems, production, non-production, as well as things that the users do after they log in. So it started off as a partnership and it turned into an acquisition. It's very exciting. We're working very hard at the moment to plan for the future and building new products and new functionality. And we'll be talking about some of that new stuff later in this webinar. So next slide, please. So I'd like to start off by talking about single sign-on. Very straightforward. Everybody, I think, probably knows what single sign-on is, but this diagram, you'll see why later, but this diagram is just there to set the scene. When we talk about single sign-on in the SAP world, we're talking about the initial logon happening at the workstation. If it's a mobile device, then obviously it's logging into the device, but typically it's used at a workstation. The user logs in and they're authenticating using Active Directory domain, Entra ID credentials, might be a certificate on a smart card. It could be Windows Hello for Business. In fact, we are seeing within our customers that Windows Hello for Business is growing in adoption. It's becoming quite popular. I think Microsoft did a good job there. People, end users, don't like passwords. We all understand that passwords are bad, and when you don't have passwords, that's the ideal scenario. So moving to a passwordless future is really a big emphasis of us, of our company and our products. We want everybody to be in a situation where you don't need passwords anymore. It's going to take time, but small steps, and Windows Hello for Business allows you to start moving in that direction. Anyway, after you've logged into your workstation, let's say in this example, we've got 3 SAP systems. They could be in your landscape, they could be production, non-production. When you log into the first system, you're going to get single sign-on, because when you log into the workstation, you are getting a token that allows you to be authenticated to the first SAP system. And then that same token would then be used to access other systems. So the end user experience is amazing. Users love it, because before this, they had lots of passwords and they had to remember those passwords. And we've come across time and time again, we come across customers who don't have single sign-on and they have spreadsheets and notebooks where they write the passwords down. I'm sure some of you on this call are probably familiar with that. That's obviously not good. Many attacks occur because passwords are left sitting on desktops, in files, in spreadsheets, on sticky notes, on monitors. It's still happening today, believe it or not. I've seen it myself. Anyway, single sign-on is obviously beneficial, and this is how it works. The next slide, please. So let's talk about MFA, or multi-factor authentication. Just in case you're not aware, I'm sure most of you are, but MFA is about using multiple factors. The password is one factor, but other factors are things like biometrics, hardware tokens, anything that's in addition to the password. So if an attacker steals your password, they can't do anything because they haven't got the other factors that are needed. It might be access to a physical device as well as something that's personal to you, like your fingerprint or your facial or your retina scan through facial recognition or through iris recognition. So that's what MFA is. Why do we need it? It's to avoid data breaches. It also is required and mandated for many regulatory compliance requirements. I've put GDPR here as an example, but there are many. GDPR is where you're protecting personal data, and the GDPR actually strongly recommend using MFA for protecting personal data. And last point is actually quite worth remembering. Hackers don't break in, they log in. Obviously, a hacker uses other methods. They don't always log in. They actually get in other ways. But at the end result is that 90% or more hacks or data breaches are actually caused by some kind of credential breach, either by guessing credentials or working out what the credentials are. So passwords, MFA, very important. Right, so how do we implement MFA? This diagram actually shows MFA on top of a single sign-on architecture. So earlier we showed SSO. This is MFA stuck on top of that. So typically what would happen in that kind of architecture is the user would log into their workstation, and then when they log into the first SAP system, which might be immediately, it might be several hours later, that's when they get the MFA challenge. So they get MFA, a token is issued of some sort, and that token is used to authenticate them, in this case to system A. When they log into system B or C, then their token is used. So effectively you're getting a single sign-on experience from that point onwards. So the question you've got to ask yourself is that good enough? If I log into the first SAP system and I get MFA, and then 7 or 8 hours later, I log into my most critical production system in my landscape, and I've got access to confidential data, and I've got administrative rights, and I'm not going to be challenged for MFA when I do that. Is that good? I don't think it is. The fact that I've actually used MFA when I logged into my first SAP system isn't good enough, in my opinion. It needs to be more targeted. So that architecture, what you're seeing there, is actually surprisingly used by other products that are in this space. So obviously we're not the only company that offer a product like TrustBroker. There are other products, and this is how they work. We can work this way as well, but we also have a better way. So let's go on to the next slide and look at what that is. So this is the better way of doing it. The way that our product works is that TrustBroker is installed on every SAP system. And it's installed on every SAP system, and it decides what method of authentication is appropriate when you perform an action on that SAP system. And what I mean by action is logging on, or an action could also be something that you do after you've logged on. And we'll come on to that a little bit more in a moment. So when an action is performed on a SAP system, TrustBroker decides, you can obviously configure it, and SecurityBridge can help there as well. TrustBroker decides whether MFA is required. So the key thing that differentiates us from other products is all about the when the MFA happens. It's not when you log on to the first system after you've logged into Windows or your desktop. We support Mac OS, by the way, as well. It's about when the MFA should happen. Because I'm British, we're from the UK, I like to talk about the crown jewels in London. And if you were protecting the crown jewels, would you put your best security at the gate to the castle, or would you actually put your best security actually on top of the crown jewels? The answer is obvious. Clearly, you would put your security on top of the crown jewels, and that's what people do. In the Louvre in Paris, the Mona Lisa is protected by security guards actually at the actual painting itself, not at the entrance to the Louvre. Obviously, they have security there as well, but these are examples in the real world of where security is actually implemented in the right place. So that's what we're doing with this product. We are able to protect the action that's performed, that's actually the action which you need to protect. So in this example, the user is logging onto system B, and they are actually being required to use MFA because on system B, that user has access to confidential data. If another user logs onto that system who doesn't have access to the confidential data, and that's what you're trying to protect, then they wouldn't get MFA. So there's an example of why this is important, because if you're not careful, you can actually trigger an MFA challenge too often, and the users get annoyed because they don't understand why they are being required to use MFA. If you make it more targeted and you trigger the MFA challenge only when it's needed, when the actions are being performed that need it, then the users understand it better, they don't get annoyed, you get much better user adoption, and you end up being more secure. What more is there to want? Okay, next slide, please. So let's now talk about step-up authentication. Step-up authentication is where we look at different strengths of authentication, like walking up some stairs, and the authentication method is increased depending on the risk. So a typical example where this would be used is I log into a SAP system and I get single sign-on. I do something in the SAP system. Well, I guess the best case scenario is I log into the SAP system, I get single sign-on, and then I realize that I don't need to do the work yet, so I log off and I get on with something else. So it's not very sensible for the user to have to go through the MFA challenge because they're logging in to that SAP system. So getting in with single sign-on is perfect. They log in with a click, log off, move on, do something else. If, however, I log on to a SAP system with single sign-on, and then afterwards I've logged in, I do something which requires strong authentication. Maybe I'm using my elevated access that I've been given, or maybe I'm accessing some data, or I've actually, that's confidential data that only I should be able to access, or other users. Or maybe I'm releasing a bank payment, or processing some, making an approval that needs to be done in a secure way so that it's actually approved properly. So these are examples of where you need to go up the steps and go to a higher level of authentication. And as you can see on the left, it says a more targeted approach, very much more targeted. So customers who've bought our products in the past and are using this step-up authentication really love it because they know that they are protecting their crown jewels and also implementing MFA the right way. Next slide, please. So this is what it looks like. So in this example, System B, where we have the confidential data, we are triggering an MFA challenge, or sorry, step one is where the user starts the action. Let's say it's a transaction. They would start the transaction. TrustBroker will then do a policy check where it's deciding if MFA is required. If MFA is not required, then the transaction is run. So the policy check is being run at the transaction execution, or whatever the action is they're performing. If MFA is required, then the MFA is enforced on the user, and if the MFA is unsuccessful, because it's not really them, or they've lost their phone, or whatever it is, whatever reason, if it's not successful, then the action will not happen. So if it's a T code that they're running, then the T code will not be executed because the MFA failed. If it is successful and they've successfully authenticated themselves and proved that they are who they say they are using strong authentication, then the action is performed. So that's how it works simply, and I will show that in a demo in a few moments. Third system, sorry, can you go back please, just very quickly. Sorry, thanks. In the third system, we've got admin access. So we're triggering an MFA challenge because the user is actually performing an action that is decided that it's high risk because it's only should be performed by an admin. Now, these are just examples, and before we move on to the next slide and do the demo, I just want to say one thing, and that is the policy check is actually something that's really quite critical, because with the policy check, we are checking things inside the SAP system to decide if the MFA is required or not. Just a little hint of something that's coming in a later slide later on in this webinar. We are able to call out to SecurityBridge to ask SecurityBridge, should MFA happen at this point? And we're going to show you how that's done. Holger's going to give you a little demo. I'm going to show you part of it as well. So that's where we're leading with this webinar. Okay, next slide, please. So I'm going to share my screen now and show you a demo of some of the features of the product. Just bear with me a second. So share screen. Right. Okay. So I'm logged on to Windows Desktop. As I mentioned, we also support Mac OS, but a lot of our customers use a mixture of Windows and Mac. In fact, we also support Linux desktops, but we don't have many customers using Linux as a desktop environment. So I'm going to show you SAP GUI first of all. So it's a thick client application, and I'm going to just log on to an SAP system. Double click, and I'm in. It requires me to specify which client I want to log into, because in this system I've got a user in two different clients, client 0 and client 100. Typically I would be a basis admin and I've got access to client 0, so I can log into client 0. let's say I wanted to log into the system again, I can do that and log into client 100. Very easy. Users love it. So wonderful functionality. Some of you may already have some form of single sign-on already in place within your landscape, so you're probably familiar with this. So when the session is established, I'm also getting a little padlock, which means that my session is secured using the Secure Network Communications, or SNC capability. So we're providing an SNC library, and our SNC library is not only authenticating users, it's also encrypting the session through, and that padlock demonstrates it. I'm going to just log off here for a moment, and then now I'm going to talk about how we implement MFA during the logon. We have a policy on the SAP system, and this policy is currently edited using an editor. I'm actually using this system on a Linux box. It could be on Windows or Unix. Lots of different operating systems are used. By the way, we are supported on SAP RISE. I know a lot of companies are moving to RISE or have moved their systems to RISE. Our product can actually be used on a RISE infrastructure. It's SAP approved for that purpose. And in a RISE environment, then because this is at the OS level, you need to get SAP to help you with it. But we have a feature that we're building in the next version of our product coming up, where you can actually run a transaction on the SAP system, and that transaction will allow you to edit the policy. So there won't be any need to get access to the OS level. The reason why it's at the OS level is because the SNC library that we're supporting here is actually sitting at the OS level, and it makes it more efficient because it's where the actual code is running. So what does the policy do? This policy rule called entMFA is actually checking the role of the user. So as I mentioned earlier, we can decide whether MFA is required based on what the user has access to. So in this case, I've got SAP PC user admin, which means I'm a user administrator, and I am therefore being required to use MFA. You could have multiple roles, and multiple people can have MFA for different reasons. You can even have different MFA products. I'm using Entra MFA here. We actually have another built-in MFA functionality, which is based on TOTP, that can be used for some users. And it's quite useful to have a mixture, because you might have people who don't have an AD account. Internal corporate users could have Entra MFA, but people who are coming in from the outside into the system, consultants, you may not be giving them an AD account, so they won't have Entra MFA, and therefore you can use a different MFA product. We have customers who take advantage of that. That's more applicable to browser-based authentication, which we're not talking about here. This is for SNC. So I am checking the role assignment of the user. I'm also checking what's called auth time. Best way to demonstrate that is to, the best way to explain the auth time is to demonstrate it. So I'm going to go up to the top of this file and tell it to run that rule. And then I save the file. Now that policy change is immediate. It doesn't require a SAP system restart. So when I log onto the system, I need to share my mobile phone screen first so that you can see what's happening on my phone. So this is my mobile phone. It's a cast from my phone, so you can see exactly what's happening on it. I got a notification from the Microsoft Authenticator app, and it's requiring me to enter a number. This is called number matching, and it's designed to make sure that the person who's got the phone with the app on it is the same as the person in front of the keyboard. Microsoft actually enforced number matching because before they had a push notification that didn't have it, and they considered that it was considered to be insecure, because what happened was people used to go clicking on approvals on their mobile phone without actually knowing what they were doing, and that could potentially let a hacker in. So you'll see it's quite easy for the end user. I was just able to log in. It asked me to approve on my phone. I clicked the approval. I then used my fingerprint, and I was in. Nice and easy. If I now log off the system and then I log on again, this time I don't get required to use MFA, and that's because I've got that auth time equals 2 minutes. Let's go back and have a look at that again. So in the policy, we have entMFA, auth time equals 2 minutes. Now, in practice, you'd probably set that to something a bit higher than 2 minutes, maybe 1 hour, 2 hours, whatever you decide to use. Or you might not have it you might not want it at all, in which case every time a user logs onto that system, they'll be required to use MFA. It's up to you. You've got the control over how often the MFA happens. You've got to be aware, though, that if you set it to something too high, I was talking to a company yesterday and they said they wanted to set it to 24 hours. I said that means the first time the user logs into that system, they're going to be required to use MFA, but they could potentially walk away from their desk and somebody could sit down at their keyboard and do something by logging onto the system and they wouldn't be required to use MFA. And they said, yes, that's a good point. Didn't think of that. So think through it carefully. Think about the risk that you're trying to address here. As we said, it's all about risk-based authentication. We give you the controls and we will obviously help you and guide you and make sure that you adopt our product best practices, but we give you the controls to allow you to change how often and when MFA happens within your SAP system landscape. We've also got this config parameter in the policy, condition in the policy called existing sessions. This is designed so that if I log into this system and let's say I was required to use MFA every single time, if I then use this button for creating a new session, then I get a new session, and you might want it so that only MFA happens on the first session, but not subsequent sessions. Regardless of how often those sessions are opened, I could be sitting here for 30 minutes working on something and looking at different things in different screens. I know a lot of SAP GUI users do this a lot. They have multiple windows open, and it's quite useful to control how often the MFA happens. If I had to use MFA too often, I would get annoyed as a user. It would be almost like going back to having lots of passwords. Not quite as insecure, but it would be, from a user experience point of view, it would get annoying, and users' productivity is important. We don't want angry users. So that's why we check for existing sessions, so that we can control whether MFA happens only if it's a new session. But I think what should happen now is if I log in again, I should get MFA because, yes, that was good. I've got the MFA happening because the last time I did the MFA was 2 minutes ago. So I enter the right number, use my fingerprint, and now I'm in. Okay, so now we're logged in. Let's talk about step-up authentication. So I gave an example earlier of running a transaction. So the transaction that I've got configured, SE16, is going to require MFA when I run the transaction. So let's just see what that looks like. Move that over here. Now this transaction could, for example, have been, MFA could have been determined when I ran this transaction by SecurityBridge. And in fact, that's what happened in this particular case. Our product is actually configured to call SecurityBridge, and SecurityBridge has determined that SE16 is going to require MFA. So SecurityBridge says yes. So TrustBroker says, okay, let's enforce that requirement. In this case, I'm being required to enter the number 78. Let's just see what happens if I enter the wrong number. Let's say I've mistyped it, or I'm actually an attacker and I've actually just trying to hack my way in and I've entered the wrong number. It just says you entered the wrong number and the transaction is not executed. So I have to try again. SE16. This time I'm going to do it correctly. So you'll see a failed and a successful authentication. I want to refer back to this scenario in a few moments because there's something quite useful and important that you need to understand about failed authentications. Okay, so the transaction is now executed successfully. So we've seen an example of step-up authentication. There are other things that I could show if we were giving a more complete demo. I think this is enough just to give you an insight. We can trigger MFA based on electronic signatures, certain fields being changed on DIN Pro screens. There's lots of things that our product can do. We have a customer, for example, who uses our product for the banking module, where they have thousands of people in the company who are actually approving bank payments, and they wanted to use MFA for the bank payment approval. In fact, that customer doesn't use Microsoft for MFA, they use Okta, because we support Okta as well. So Okta, Microsoft, Duo, Ping ID, RSA, these are all examples of MFA products that we use. The idea is that we are not implementing an MFA product ourselves that you have to buy. We are basically using an MFA product that you already have in place within your company, and we're just taking advantage of it. Your users are already familiar with it. You've already got the MFA product set up. You might be using it for your Microsoft Office environment. You might be using it for your VPN. The idea is that we're not replacing or telling you to change the MFA product that you have in place. You're using the existing one. We're just integrating with it. So when you install TrustBroker, we are just required to install TrustBroker on the SAP application servers. And if it's a thick client like the GUI, then there is a component installed on the workstation. And that's the only place that TrustBroker needs to be installed. There is no service in BTP. There is no software on the Java stack. There's just a component on the workstation for the GUI and on the SAP application servers. No other place, no software is required anywhere else. And that cuts down your infrastructure costs and makes it simpler to install. We have a lot of customers who really enjoy the simplicity of our product, but obviously it's got a lot of value. So it's simple but high value and makes your system secure. So what else do I want to show? Yeah, let's talk about some browser authentication. So if I launch this shortcut, it's going to log me into the system and trigger an MFA challenge for WebGUI. Some people are still using WebGUI or any other ICF service on the ABAP stack applies. So it doesn't have to be anything. It doesn't have to be WebGUI. It could be any ICF service. It could be Fiori Launchpad. It could be lots and lots of different things. So I'm going to press done, click on here, and I'm now logged into WebGUI. So again, if I run SE16, because we've got a policy set up for SE16, then I'm actually going to be required to use MFA. So it's not just for the GUI, it's also applicable for when I go through a browser-based environment. Same would apply for NetWeaver Business Client. NetWeaver Business Client is also using HTML to connect between the desktop and the SAP system. In the case of WebGUI, I have to click on the OK button once I've successfully authenticated. So we've seen some browser authentication. One more last example before I finish the demo. If I go to fiori.cybersafe.com, just to show what it looks like in Fiori, I'm being expected to use MFA, so I'm going to go here and use the Authenticator app. 52, fingerprint, approved, and now I'm in Fiori. Now with Fiori, I'm using the auth time feature. So if I go here again, I close my browser. Normally you would close your browser, it would destroy your cookies, and you would end up being logged off. What's happening here is I'm able to just go straight back in again. No password prompt, no MFA. I'm just getting a single sign-on experience because I've got the auth time set to say that I don't want to have MFA within a certain period of time. I think I've got it set to 2 minutes like I had on the other example. So that's the end of the online demo that I wanted to show. I'd like to go back to the slides now. Holger, could you bring the next slide up, please? I'm just going to summarize a few of the, well, all of the different ways in which TrustBroker can be used. So in this slide, we're showing that TrustBroker can be used as a standalone product without the SecurityBridge platform. So obviously there are companies out there that bought TrustBroker from CyberSafe and they didn't have SecurityBridge platform. There are also customers who bought TrustBroker for CyberSafe who do have the SecurityBridge platform. They have both products. That we'll talk about next. So without SecurityBridge, TrustBroker is offering the SSO and the MFA during the logon and the step-up authentication, just like I showed you in the demo. All the things I showed you just now are applicable if you're using TrustBroker as a standalone product. And we have various modules that you can license, usually on a per user basis. So each of these modules can be licensed according to the number of users using them. So you can contact us and we can give you a price for the product depending on your needs. And the MFA is based on SAP role assignment, as you saw in the demo, time since successful MFA, again, you saw that in the demo, existing sessions, which we talked about earlier. Also, we support the ability to check which client application is used. That's mainly used when we're using the FIT client, and we had the customer who wanted to log into SAP using SAP GUI, but they also had Eclipse on the desktop, and Eclipse is actually making an SNC connection to the SAP system, and they wanted to have a different MFA behavior for the Eclipse users compared to the SAP GUI users. So our policies are able to check the executable that's being used on the workstation and change how the MFA is triggered based on which application is used. Next slide, please. So now we're going to talk about when TrustBroker is combined with SecurityBridge. So the customer's got both products. They could have started with SecurityBridge and bought TrustBroker, or the other way around, or they might have them both already. So all the same conditions are supported. All the features in the TrustBroker product are still applicable. Nothing gets removed. It's all there, but you get the added advantage that TrustBroker can now call SecurityBridge and ask SecurityBridge whether MFA is required. And this is where the real risk-based and context-aware authentication capability comes in, which is what the title of this webinar is all about. So When we talk about context aware, we're talking about the fact that SecurityBridge platform, as you know, is aware of what users are doing in the system. It's aware of the behavior of the users. It's aware of threats that it's detected and potential risks. And it's looking at things like suspicious users, and it's able to say that user is suspicious. What TrustBroker is now able to do is to get access to that information by asking SecurityBridge, hey, here's some information for you. Should we use MFA or not? SecurityBridge will come back and say yes or no, and then TrustBroker enforces that MFA. So that can happen during the logon. It can happen at the step-up authentication phase after you've logged in. Any place that TrustBroker is involved, processing actions that are performed before you get into the system or after you've got into the system can call SecurityBridge and ask it whether MFA is required. Step 2 there, item 2, TrustBroker will inform SecurityBridge about successful or failed authentication. I used the example earlier where I actually entered the number wrong, and I think this is why I wanted to refer back to that, because if the authentication using MFA actually fails for some reason, that could be suspicious. So if the user is not getting successful MFA multiple times, then SecurityBridge will need to know about that so that it can track that happening and report on it and decide whether there's a threat or alert or whatever SecurityBridge is configured to do. So we will eventually, sometime in 2026, make that available so that TrustBroker is actually telling SecurityBridge stuff that it's not aware of at the moment. So there's 2 ways. Well, it's basically all in one direction. It's TrustBroker calling SecurityBridge, but we will come on to another scenario where SecurityBridge actually calls TrustBroker. So we'll come on to that next. Can you go to the next slide, please? So these are the conditions that are in the policy. So because TrustBroker is calling SecurityBridge and saying, should we use MFA or not? SecurityBridge has a policy, which Holger is going to demonstrate to you shortly. That policy inside SecurityBridge has various conditions in it, and these are some of the conditions that are available in the 705 version that's due to be available in December this year, next month. So you can include conditions based on SAP systems. So you can have a condition that says, only apply this policy on certain SAP systems within my landscape. You can use username matching with pattern matching. So you can, if you want to, only make it applicable or not applicable to certain users. You could, for example, say, I want this to occur for every single user apart from these users. Have it as an exception. It will be able to check things like users who have super rights or elevated access rights, whether they've got a specific role or profile. Does the user have critical authorizations? Because as obviously your SecurityBridge customers, you know that these features are already in the platform. We are just taking advantage of them. The last point is quite handy. So when TrustBroker is handling the logon of the user, it might be that that user normally gets SSO and then all of a sudden they disappear for 90 days or 60 days. You can decide. If they disappear and they don't log on, what's happened? Does that mean they've left the company? Whatever reason, it's important to think, okay, what risk is there of that happening? And therefore, should I trigger MFA when they log in again? Do we really still know that it's still the same user? And that's the question you've got to ask yourself. So I'm going to hand over to Holger now.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, and just also looking at some of the questions that came up regarding the policy configuration and interface, UI interface, how to do this. I think it's important to know that the one that you just demonstrated is, the one that can be used for TrustBroker as a standalone product, right? So this was the initial one, and for sure we have a graphical user interface, and this is the one that I'd like to show you now. So with the 705 version of SecurityBridge, you will see a new menu item in the global settings called MFA, and there are 2 different things that you can configure there. So I like first to start with the policies, just to show you how you can configure those things that Tim just mentioned in a very nice way, the same user experience that you know from SecurityBridge and other things, right? So you can have multiple so-called MFA condition groups these are sets of conditions that you want to define and have MFA raised based on these things, right? So what you just seen is exactly the one that was causing the MFA challenge Tim was just showing in his demo, right? The one that looked at critical transaction like the SA16, for example. But you can have additional ones as you want here. And you see here a full set of various conditions that you can use. Some of them, because this is a internal system, already contain the future ones that are already selectable here, but they will function with the 706 version. But you see, we want to make sure that the typical scenarios that you have in SecurityBridge, like for example, when we raise events for critical programs or transactions that are used, or we raise events in case of users that logged in for the first time after a very long period, or for super user or other users that log in, for example, from a suspicious terminal. All these conditions are usable and for MFA, you can have as many as you want, and for sure you could also have exclusion rules. So you can say, yes, I want to have it in general for SA16, SA16N, but in case there is a different condition there, I'd like, let's say it's a special user group that I define, I don't want them to be bothered, I can have this as an exclusion. So you see, there are tons of ways to configure those things and to make sure that you only enforce MFA when you really need that. Now let me go back and talk about an additional use case that is, yeah, quite similar to what Tim just demonstrated. This is just for you for reference, the things that will be in 706, and we will have more of those in 2026 as we go. Now, let's go to a second scenario that we implemented as an integration between SecurityBridge and TrustBroker. And those of you that already use PAM, for example, to control elevated activities and privileged users, they can now, with the 704 version of the platform, can use TrustBroker to enforce MFA when validating or reviewing audit logs, PAM audit logs, and confirming the review. So let me show you how this works and what's the prerequisite for that. Let me see. So here we are. This brings me first to the second option that you have in the global settings, which is the integration of TrustBroker in SecurityBridge, actually the step-up authentication use case. And it's very simple. You just enable this toggle, and we also have information for you how to configure the other things that are needed, or how this thing actually works here. Now, what happens if you toggle this on and you have PAM, you have several PAM sessions to review? It is very simple. You can go to a session. I'm trying to pick one where I'm authorized to do this. As you are reviewing it and you confirm that you've done this and you want to press the change status, it will invoke the MFA. And on my application, on my device, I get the same MFA request that we've seen before with on Tim's device. It's not that fancy. I don't have that screen mirroring capability, but as you can see, it worked, and the review status is now green and it is reviewed. Now we can also do this, for example, with another one where I will not confirm the MFA, or let's say reject that. Then you will see that the system says it has been rejected. The status remains as before, it's not changed. And you can imagine that you can use this capability also to block a lot of elevated actions or critical actions in your environment. And this is also the idea that we have for the roadmap and for the things that we want to do in 2026. Good, so let me come back to this and correct. So with that, we are, Tim, ready for the Q&A session.
Yeah.
I hope some of the questions that were already there are already answered. I think one very interesting for the security customer masterclass in Rotterdam in December. Are we planning to also show TrustBroker there and present it? You know that?
I don't think so. I don't know. We'll get back to you.
Yeah, but at least I can check with our colleagues that are there and make sure that they can demo similar to what I just did. It's the same system.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they can do this. I think we hopefully answer the question around the policy management, how you can do this. I think the important note is that the future of policy configuration is in SecurityBridge, right? If you want to be very sophisticated there and have very different use cases to be covered, this is the place where you want to configure those things. Yeah.
Shall I answer the next one? It says, can MFA be pushed for a Critical Fury app? Not yet, but it's something that we are well aware of. It's a big, in big demand. It's an enhancement that we are planning to implement. It's a little bit like step-up authentication for transactions. When you log in through a GUI, you're running a transaction. When you log in through Fury, you're clicking a tile. We want to be able to trigger MFA with a policy check when a tile is clicked. And that's something that we are planning in the roadmap for next year. So it's not there yet. And it's good that you're asking because it shows that there's interest in that functionality. Somebody said, is there a policy editor available? Well,
yeah, I think
we've seen it in SecurityBridge. Yeah. That's the future for customers using both products. Can TrustBroker kick in when a user conducts multiple critical events? I guess I don't quite understand that. I
think, yeah, so, but I can imagine if we have multiple conditions, yeah, so...
I think you might be asking about a situation where a user does something and then they do something else.
Yeah.
That they're doing multiple things in a sequence.
Correct.
I don't know whether that's possible in the platform.
So not yet, but we definitely will have that in 2026, where we will calculate, we call it the risk factor for each user. So the user might do various things, various critical or suspicious things, not just certain actions. And we will calculate a risk factor in real time where we are can flag a user as being critical, and then if TrustBroker will detect the user wants to access certain things, even if these actions are normal actions the user is performing, but SecurityBridge detects the risk of that user is very high at the moment, then SecurityBridge will say, I think we will enforce MFA once again.
Yeah.
And then you can do this, or even block the thing if it's really something very, very critical where we have an IOC or something like this detected. So I think we are very flexible and very dynamic to respond to critical actions.
I think it's worth saying that any customers who have specific things that they would like to trigger MFA on, please reach out to us, because we want to hear about real use cases. And if you have a need for MFA when something happens within your system, we will, if we don't support it, we will consider adding it, because we know that there's a need for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good.
Next question: can policies in SB be configured? Yes, we should.
Yeah. The other one is interesting for you, Tim, I think.
Build work zone. Somebody says, does it work on build work zone? No, but that's in the roadmap. We recognize that build work zone is being used by a number of customers as a preference to Fiori Launchpad running on premise or on S4. So we actually want to be able to build a new product for build work zone. It's in the roadmap for 2026. So yes, very good question. What happens if SecurityBridge is unreachable when a transaction in SAP is called? We thought about this and we decided that MFA should be the default. So if TrustBroker calls out to SecurityBridge using an RFC connection, because it's basically a system-to-system RFC call, if that connection doesn't establish because of misconfiguration or because the system is not responding, then it enforces MFA, because that's what you'd expect it to do.
Yep.
Otherwise, you'd end up being exposed. It says, if you have SB, I suppose you need to pay for TB license. Yes, absolutely. It's a different product. So if you're interested in the TrustBroker product, reach out to us and we'll be able to talk to you about pricing. Look at your use case first. Next one is, could we enable MFA for users assigning SAP all to an SAP account and those who are granted SAP all? Additionally, can we set conditions for when the MFA prompt appears? For example, can it appear 15 minutes after the action? Ooh, number of questions there. Maybe Holger, you can answer about the SAP all.
Yeah, I think, for the first one, clearly, yes. So these are some of the basic use cases that we support. The other one, Tidiane, I'm wondering whether you want to have it after the fact.
No, I don't understand that. Why would you want to have MFA 15 minutes after I've done something bad? The idea is that I perform an action and I'm required to use MFA. That's the point when you need to check that I am really me.
I think a good picture, as you also mentioned this, is the Louvre, that the things that happened recently at the Louvre, right? Yeah. So this is MFA after 15 minutes. So it should be really right at that time. But maybe there are scenarios, right? So we can
reach out and discuss that more.
Or in Rotterdam, maybe. Tidiane, probably there.
Somebody else asking about the products being licensed separately. Yes, they are.
Yes, they are.
Next one, is it possible to configure MFA based on the IP address or region?
Yeah.
It is possible. In the TrustBroker product, we can have a policy condition to check IP address, but we don't typically recommend that is used. We added it several years ago and we found that customers after a while didn't want to use it anymore, because I think what happened was people are used to thinking about the old way of building a network where you have a perimeter. And now with the zero trust architecture being the desired approach, the perimeter is not really clear anymore. So checking the IP address, what meaning does it have? It would allow you to check if you want MFA based on if the person's coming in externally or internally, but really you've got to realize that most attacks happen on the inside. Not most, but a lot of attacks, the increasing number of attacks, credential-based attacks, are happening on the inside. The user or the attacker gets into your network and then they get into the system after they've got into your network. And so they would be an insider. So insider attacks are on the increase. And this is information that you can get from the Verizon data breach report. If you read that report regularly, it comes out every year. It talks about the growing increase in insider attacks. So checking IP address, I fail to see the need for it personally, but obviously would be willing to talk if there was a real requirement.
Yeah, but Tim, I'd like to add, because we also, when we look at suspicious users, suspicious identities, right? The IP address also plays a certain role. So we are already processing that there, And with that, over that rule, you might also want to use that condition instead of a blank IP address range or something like this.
That's very true, actually. And in fact, this person goes on to say, with another example, maybe I misunderstood the question, but the use case where a user normally logs in from the US or Germany or China, UK, and then all of a sudden they log in from China. If the person is logging in from China, which isn't normally where they log in from, then it could be the genuine user on holiday, or it could be some hacker or attacker who has actually stolen their credentials and is logging in from China. So that's when the IP address is very useful to actually block an attack.
Yeah.
Does it support Duo? Yes, it does. It supports RSA, Duo, Ping ID, Okta, Microsoft, and anything that supports Radius. So we have MFA products that have a Radius interface. We can support that as well. But yes, Duo was the first MFA product we implemented. It was when it was a separate company, and then Duo was actually bought by Cisco. So yes, we do definitely support Duo. A few more questions, I think 3 more, so then we'll finish because we're running late. It says, can you set up MFA for each of the subsequent T codes? Yes, you can.
Yeah, that would be probably
you've got the option there. You can have MFA on the first T code they run, and then you could have a time limit that says any more T codes that require MFA within a 1 hour period, then no MFA. Or you could say every single time I run a T code that requires MFA, I want to use MFA. Now, that could get annoying because people will be running many T codes within their session, and you don't want to annoy the users. So you've got the options. Flexibility is the key. Does it work on the HANA DB access? No, because when you log into the HANA database, you're not going via the ABAP stack or any application server. So unfortunately, we are not triggering MFA when a user connects to the database, for example, using HANA Studio. That's not something that we currently support. It is technically possible to do that, and we've actually looked at this before because it sometimes comes up as a question. It is technically possible. So if you actually have a real business case for this, a real interest, please reach out to us and we'd be willing to look at that and maybe find out what's involved in doing it. It's just that we've got lots of things to do and we have to prioritize them. Can't implement everything straight away.
Good. Let's look at the last one and then close.
One more. Can MFA be set on controller's phone? Whenever a user uses SE16, for instance, controller needs to allow it. Hope I'm making sense. So a user uses SE16. Are you saying that you want the MFA to be sent to somebody else?
Yeah.
To approve the fact that they're running SE16. Okay. Don't currently have that capability. Normally the MFA is happening for the user that's performing the action to make sure it's them. What you're actually asking for is sending the MFA challenge to somebody else who's going to approve the user for doing that transaction. Almost like the problem with that really is the number matching. As you saw when you're using Microsoft Entra with MFA number matching, the user is actually shown a number on their screen, and that has to be entered into the phone, into the app on the phone. So in this case, it wouldn't really work. I think it's because the MFA products are not designed to work this way.
But I think we can imagine, Tim, is it correct to say, actually, we invoke the MFA based on the email address that is configured? Yes. We could even imagine to say, well, it's not the user's email address, but it's a fixed email address for certain things, right? At least we can think of, it's not available yet in the product, but we might find ways to have this. Now, also looking a little bit of the time, we are almost 1 hour. We'd like also to thank you for your attention and show you that you can now contact us across the globe, also in the UK. If you have further questions and you would like to discuss this in a session, please feel free to reach out to us. We are happy to walk you through and also to give you a more detailed demo based on your requirements. With that, thank you and have a great day.